I'm going to talk a little bit about writing. Mostly I'm going to talk about writing because I think, as Michelle said, this is something I take a lot of pride in. I hope it's one of my strong points is both gathering and being careful about the content and then translating and presenting it so that whether I'm writing for a trade or a more scientific audience or whether I'm writing for my neighbors, which is mostly what I do at the AP, I want everybody to feel that it's very accessible to them, that you can read a story, you don't need a science degree, you don't need any special knowledge, you can understand it, you come away with it with something. It adds value to you. Otherwise, why write and why read? So I'm going to talk a little bit about writing for internal versus external readership, trades versus consumers, how to make hard topics appealing, how to write science, how to humanize, how to portray work even if it's in a very early stage, which I think is a challenge as I look through some of the publications that were sent to me. It's hard for, I think, many people to write something with implied impact or potential for impact, but when it's not quite there yet. And there's a way to do that. So my main message is that you can't really write a science story unless you understand the science. You have to. If you're coming away and you don't have a grip on it or you don't know what the lead is or the focus, it's probably because you need to do a little more work. And I, as Michelle said, I like to front end my work. I really put the work up initially. I find that benefits me. When I sit down to write, the writing goes much easier if I take the time to really invest and so I understand the story. Not just the point, but where that science fits in with what's come before, because no science, as we know, takes place in a vacuum. It's all a continuum. No one study settles a question or an issue. It's always an ongoing process. And to be true to science and to write it well, you need to represent where your particular piece fits into the big humanity. My second message is don't exaggerate. Even though no matter how much your institution or your researcher wants to and believes that this is important work, you have to step back and put yourself in the outsider's shoes and say, where does it fit in? And how can I be true to this story? I'm not going to misportray it. I asked the scientists to suggest simple words or metaphors to explain complex topics. Terry Devitt from UW in the back, or UW-Madison, will tell you. He had to hold my hand when I was really new at science writing through Jamie Thompson's stem cell discovery. Boy, oh boy. I think between Terry and Jamie, the two of them had more metaphors to help me really wrap my head around this. But simple things, simple complexes, the more complex a topic is, the more it needs simple explanations so that your neighbor could understand it. Tell them that visuals will help them get attention to their story, and ask them to share any materials they have. Ask for their slides, ask for microscope pictures, ask for anything that will help you get attention to your story, or say, is there anything good that we could offer here? Okay, if anybody is going to have a media interview, tell that researcher that you'll help them prepare and rehearse them. And just say, here's some questions that if I were interviewing you, here are some things that I think you can expect to hear. Ideally, those should include, how does this advance the field? What particular contribution does this make? Who disagrees with this theory or approach, and why? Why might they disagree with it? Because there are often many solutions to many problems, and there is controversy in science. That's what makes it an area to research and work in. And always, to me, one of the most important things that needs to be in every story, what is the next step? Where does it go from here? What do we need to know that we don't know now? What does your work tell us about where we have to be and go from here? So those are good things to include in your story. It's also something that I think a reporter would be asking. How to write science. Again, my hallmark, I'd like to think, is that my stories are approachable, whether I'm writing for a very sophisticated audience or a lay audience. Everybody likes to feel smart. Nobody likes to feel dumb. Have you ever just been turned off because you couldn't get through something? Boy, and I don't mean the medical journal articles, because those I have to read over and over. But everyone should feel smarter after they read your story, whether you're writing for a trade or writing for the neighbor next door. They'll only understand it if you understand it and if you can translate that science well to a wider audience. Pretend you're telling your neighbor or your mother about the work. How would you say it? If you come home and tell your spouse, I interviewed this researcher today, and he does this really cool work in molecular biology, but what was it? What did he find? If you can't, you can write the story if you can say the story. And sometimes the old tape recorder trick. I will talk about it, and I'll play it back, and I'll sit down and take notes and see how I put it, as if I were telling my neighbor. We call it the dinner table talk test. If people would talk about it at the dinner table in the language that you're going to use, you have a winner. You've written well. So see if you can really focus on short words. Go back, after you've written your story, go back through and see what you can, I call them nickel words instead of quarter words. I try to knock them down at least to dimes, those quarter words. If you use a word like pick instead of select, just, again, if you were reading it, if you were talking to it, it's going to make your writing so much more conversational. And the harder the topic, the more you need to be conversational. It will make it more understandable to people if you use language that people speak. Personalize a story with a researcher and a patient, but don't reach so far for an anecdote so that the tail is wagging the dog. It's that old joke about little Susie sat on her steps as the A-bomb appeared over the Chicago skyline. You want to lead with news. You don't want to force an anecdote. You can humanize the story by including patients or examples farther down. Everything doesn't have to have an anecdotal lead or an example as a lead. On the other hand, you have to explain the how part about all this, how things work. One story that I read in the magazines that people sent to help me prepare here had a fabulous topic. It was far red light for wound healing. And I just thought this was excellent. There was a lot of explanation about what far red light is and how the light spectrum works. But unless I missed it, I have no explanation for how this heals wounds. I don't get it. Somebody maybe can enlighten me, but I don't think I got that from the story. Just don't be afraid to answer the question that the reader would ask, and ask it yourself. Explain the so what. Why does this matter? Often that is my lead, the so what. And I learned that from my predecessor in this beat. What works in writing? What are things that are really good? Writing about something that's really new, that's truly new, and it's not just that really moves the needle or moves the field, not just turn to the screw, incremental progress. I realize that's a challenge in a lot of research environments. I'm seeing the head shaking. I think that a lot of times you have to write about things that are incremental. And in that case, you just have to put them, I borrow from the star power of other big discoveries. If, for example, when iPS cells first came along, and they gave a way perhaps to get around some of the ethical issues of stem cells. Okay, maybe there was some tweak in there that was happening that was not so it wasn't the central discovery, but it gives a more practical way to do something. Well, that's how we'll write that then. That is the key then. It gives a more practical way to do this. It gives a cheaper way, an easier way, this or that. So look for what's truly new in what you're writing and feature that and borrow the star power from the larger field and where it fits in and how it advances things. Write about things that truly matter. It's a lot easier to write about and get interest in a story about cancer versus, say, metallurgy or some very difficult topic that is not as accessible for many people. It may be important, and it's very challenging, but you have to show why it's important. Here's a great example. UWM's cover story in this annual report that they had was on a new wrench that saved a bunch of injuries or prevented a whole bunch of injuries in utility workers. Boy, oh boy, what a dry topic, I'm thinking. Somebody invented a new wrench, and I couldn't put it down. It was written very well. I can see why they use it as their cover story. It had a lot of impact because of what it did. And there was a lot in there about the materials and the metals and what it was and how it was just the right angle that avoided having somebody throw their back out or get an orthopedic injury to use. So they managed to write about the materials and to write about the design work, but they really led with the impact. The impact is that it prevented all these injuries, and it was technology transfer. Snap-on Tools, a local company, bought the rights. This is their go-to tool now. So again, show the import, write about things that matter, what matters, that person who's thrown there, who's got an orthopedic injury. Always include context. I talked about this a little bit earlier. How does it fit in or depart from what is known now? Show the consequences or potential ones. There was is anyone here from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville? Oh, okay. You're gonna be the star of my. Your publication was really nice. I want to do a shout out. That was an amazing. It was just a stellar publication. Just about everything in there. I'm going to end up using in here. They did a great story about a study about CEOs spending time golfing or playing bridge. The study, someone actually studied this. What was the economic impact of a chief executive playing golf? And they led the story with a real-world example on all the harm that came to a company while one of these guys was out playing bridge, I think. Okay, what doesn't work in writing? Those are some of the things that do work. Writing about things that matter, including consequences, showing the consequences or potential ones, including context. What doesn't work? Repeating jargon. Just push a scientist if they use big words or if they use something that is hard to understand. Don't be afraid. Ask it a couple different ways. If you really don't get it and they keep repeating the jargon, say, can you help me put that a different way? My readers won't understand that. And I'll say, I don't understand it, and I need to. So help me translate it. Help me put this in a way people will get it. A lot of stories I see do a really good job of describing the finding, and it all gets blown by a bad headline. So I don't know how many of you control your headlines in your publications. It's something that at the AP now, for a number of years, we write a short headline, like a 40, I think it's 48 characters now. I have to look because it's just changed. You know, that's almost like when you see the ticker tapes on the sides of buildings. Those are the headlines we write. We write our own, a short suggested headline, a long one, and then a big fat paragraph that is the first paragraph of our story that tells the impact. And we write those ourselves to try to guard against bad headlines, also just to help the editors too. They're dealing with an unfamiliar area. Here's what we would suggest as a headline. They're free to change it because AP's, you got 1,500 newspapers or different media members. They're going to put whatever they want on it, and we don't really have a lot of control over that. But suggest a headline. If you're not the one writing it, write a couple potential ones. Say, here's what I think would be good. So I'm going to talk just real quickly here about working with media. Boy, I try to be approachable, but I can be pretty brusque if somebody calls me. We really are hard to predict, and it's never a good thing to be able to say what a day is going to be like, because it's just unpredictable. The first tip to working with media is to truly understand what is news. So, as my neighbor used to say, my friend, we call it news, not olds. It really has to be something truly new, not just new to your hospital or new to your university. And this may sound like it contradicts what's above, but especially now in the era of the internet, topics can be stories. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to have that immediate, like we found this today or yesterday, like second cancers. Okay, it did have a news hook that there had been a recent study that I held on to that 1 of every 5 cancers was now a second cancer. But there's a way to write about that story, then that topic was really my story, that it's a result of a lot of trends. More cancers are being cured so that people have a chance to get another cancer. They also have a chance to get a lot of years of health, but it just fed into a lot of things. So think about the wider topic. If you have a piece that you're trying to sell, how does it fit in, and can I sell the topic? And this particular piece is a contributor or something like that. Realize that there's different markets or outlets for a topic versus a story. Mostly for the AP, we have those daily, it's going to be less so as we go forward, but we have a limited amount of daily things that we do. We hardly ever write single studies anymore, single journal studies. We read the journals, but we're looking for the bigger picture stories. That's what people care about. They don't care about, my institution tested this drug and this is what we found. It would have to really be a heck of a trial for us to do an individual study or story on one trial. So think about the different outlets too. A topic works very well for internal publications like the ones you write for. They're tougher sells for media unless you do have a news hook. So think about, what is my news hook? What's the reason to write this story now, today? Learn how the person you're pitching to prefers to receive pitches. For me, it's email, strictly email. Phone calls, I don't even know that I have an office line anymore. When I come back, I don't think I'm going to restore it. It depends on who you're dealing with. If you're talking to a science reporter, or if you're dealing with a general assignment reporter who's been handed this topic or this story to work on for that day and is coming to you with no background. So if you're talking about now, I want to say the PR mode rather than the internal publications mode, you really need to know something about who is calling you, and don't be afraid to ask, do you write science, especially if it's an unknown to you, an unknown person. And even that science writer may have an editor who views science, as most of them do, as another version of cops and robbers or reporting on politics. Like, just go in and grab that researcher's throat and make them tell you. Or do a FOIA, a public records request, and make them tell you. They don't understand the field. They don't understand how things work, and that even things like patient privacy and all those issues, they don't get it. They think that we should just be grabbing the necks and treating it like any other beat. And it's not like any other beat. This is much more of a partnership. And I view it that way. I view it as a matter of trust on both sides. It's a partnership with the scientists, and it's a partnership with my readership, and I got to do justice by both. So, yeah, know who you're dealing with and what they're looking for from you. But there's going to be mistrust, that they're going to come at it with the sense that necessarily that something is wrong here. And there may be something wrong. And there's never any good coming from hiding that. Or, all you can do is be as truthful as you possibly can be. There is risk in everything. Here's our risk. Here's what we're doing to manage the risk. But there's always risk. That's what I would do.
What we have.
Oh God, video. If you have video, you're gold. If you have, and I don't know much about the formats, but we have a broadcast desk in New York that will be happy to look at or take anything. I'm not New York, Washington is our broadcast center. That would love to at least be aware of what you have. They still want to produce it, usually, even though they're extremely limited in their capacity to do video, extremely limited, but they still want it. But they may take your B-roll. They love to have that. So always offer anything you have, please. Photos, B-roll. We used to not take handout photos, and they have a gazillion rules about photos. I try not to get in the middle of that. But please make us aware of what you have. It helps so much to sell a story.